Okay, I, Chair Chris Byer, call the Emergency Board of Boiler Rules meeting of January 21st, 2020 to order at 9:31 a.m. Debbie, could you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Chair Chris Byer,
Here.
Vice Chair Tony Hardenbrook is absent. Blake Alexander,
Present.
Eric Anderson,
Present.
Thomas Ingstrom,
Present.
Roger Hendricks is connected by teleconference. Thank you, Roger. Kenneth Hill,
Present.
Patrick Lamb is also connected by teleconference. Patrick?
Here.
Thank you. And Gregory Moyer is absent. Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
So at this time, ask any members if they have any changes to the agenda, and if there are any, say so. I, Chris Byer, roll the meeting agenda and order of business approved. So our next scheduled meeting is March 3rd, 2020. Read that. Okay, so unfinished business, the board review and provide a recommendation to Oregon Fruit Products on the updated information received related to the request to waive certain pressure vessel exemption requirements. This was first brought up in September. At this time, I think it'd be good to ask Mr. Hayes to just refresh our memory and give us an update.
Chairman and members of the board, first I'd like to thank you for calling this meeting and allowing me back here, and so we can continue in light of the information that I've presented. So we started out in September. I had this last winter, I bought some tanks, 2 vessels, and found out that we put them in line and to operate them. We had them plumbed in and ready to go, and then the mechanical welders and plumbers came in and said you couldn't operate these more than 15 psi because they weren't stamped. So we've spent some time and some energy going through this, trying to figure out a way we could operate these vessels. And I did bring it to the board on September 10th, I believe it was, and I was asked if perhaps we could get some testing done, some calculations, mechanical drawings, that sort of thing. I hired the Paul Mueller company, who they built the tanks. So I flew them out here, had them inspect, test, and also give me the calculations and the mechanical drawings for the vessels. And they did test them at a higher level than what we're even asking to operate them at. So they tested them at 148, and you have the paperwork there in front of you, I believe.
I didn't catch that.
So we're looking at operating at 90 psi, and we're looking at operating, or 248 at 90 psi, and we're looking at operating at a lot less than that. So the company we bought them from, we're operating them at 60 psi, and that's more like what we're looking at doing. And that brings us to where we are here today.
Thank you.
These pictures are a little better than the ones that you had previously, I believe. I was able to get some of those blown up so you could actually read the numbers.
Question through the chair. The calculations provided by Zach Wilson, is he an employee of Mueller Corporation?
He was contracted from them, yes.
And is he a licensed engineer? I don't see any stamp on here.
I'm sure he is. I could certainly get that information for you.
calculations were not available through the manufacturer?
That's, so Paul Mueller was the company that built these tanks, and I believe this is who they used for their calculations. And as far as I know, that he worked for Paul Mueller, or was hired by Paul Mueller. That's who he is representing.
I have a question through the chair.
Yes.
At the meeting that you attended, Mr. Hayes, we asked if it was possible for you to provide the manufacturer's data report from when these vessels were constructed. Was Mueller not able to provide those?
So everything that they had, they gave me, and there is some, we do have some drawings there that I passed out, or that were handed out to the rest of the board that you probably don't have there with you. Yes.
That were just distributed to board members. If I can just clarify. That's already in the packet but blown up, or are they new?
Yes.
They haven't seen before.
Those probably are, if I recall, they were in the packet, but they were small, they were little, and they weren't legible, so. Thank you.
And this is a question that one of the board members have as well. I laid it on this one.
Okay.
Okay, if it pleases the chairman, I'd like to ask my questions.
Certainly.
Okay. So my name's Eric Anderson. I'm the engineer representative here at the board. If I understand the way this documentation is laid out, it is pressure vessel jacket that should be stamped. Am I correct? Is that your interpretation of the code?
So, this Paul Mueller company, that's what they do, is they build these tanks, and not all of them. They build tanks that are stamped and some that aren't. And I don't know what the rules and laws are, but apparently there's some places that these tanks go that where they don't have to be stamped. Does that sound correct to you? Anyway, that's what I was told. And so they have tanks, a lot of their vessels are made, they have the ASME stamp on them, and then some of them are made and they do not have the stamp on them. So, however, these ones were not stamped, and they've been in operation for years at a way higher PSI than the 15 that we're operating at now. And when we bought them, that's what we thought we could operate them at, because Haynes Celestial was the past owner, and they were operating at 60 PSI, so at a higher temperature. And we thought, well, okay, these are going to be great for our business. And then we found out we could operate them at 15 instead. It's not so good for our business. So right now we're kind of idling along and trying to do whatever we can so we can get these up to our operational level, what we expected. And after having the test and everything that they've done, you know, I feel fairly confident they are as they were made. There was they noted no defects on the tanks or anything else. So anyway, so they asked me to come back here and say, you know, and see if this was good enough for the Oregon board.
Okay. So when I look at a data sheet like this that indicates the vessel here, which shows a design pressure and a test pressure of 0, that's the vessel proper? Is that correct?
I guess I couldn't answer that question. All I know is the little teeny air gap between the two jackets is the only part that was concern. Apparently, is, you know, just because it's pressurized.
Yeah.
And there is on this calcs here, there's a bursting pressure of it was way beyond what they tested at. Okay. Maximum, yeah. So they had maximum allowable working pressure was that they ran it at 90 psi at 250 degrees for however long it was. So it was a period of time, I believe it was over an hour.
Okay. So I don't know if this needs to be discussed amongst the board members, but the heat exchanger part, if you look at the code, first of all, would you agree that the jacket needs to be ASME code stamped? Would we agree with that as a board? Yes?
Yeah. Typically, that's how it
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Through the chair, if I might, Mr. Henderson. ASME Section 8 actually specifically has requirements for jacketed vessels. There's Appendix 9, mandatory Appendix 9 covers jacketed vessels. And it says that anytime you have a combination of pressure or vacuum that leads to the inner vessel wall, so between the jacket and the contents, if it has a pressure on it of 15 psi or greater, then it falls under the scope of that mandatory appendix. And this would be the case as the internal portion of the kettle is non-pressurized, but the steam jacket would be pressurized greater than 15 psi.
Okay. That's the way I interpret it. So anything, would you also agree that the shell portion, in addition to the jacketed portion, are influenced by that pressure? And so, in such a way that not only do we have to evaluate the jacket, but we also have to evaluate the shell.
Through the chair, I would agree that in the design of this jacketed vessel, pressure is being exerted on both the outer and inner shell. So both portions of it would be part of the pressure retaining boundary.
Yeah. In fact, an interpretation of the code considers it integral. It's not this is not a slapped-on jacket, it's a welded-on jacket, so they work together as an integral part of the vessel. Okay. So would it also be true, well, I'll just ask my questions because that kind of sets up the framework for this. So the code states that these jacketed vessels need to have a pressure, they need to be protected. All pressure vessels within the scope of the division, irrespective of size or pressure, shall be provided with overpressure protection in accordance with the requirements of UG 125 through 138, or with overpressure protection by system design in accordance with the requirements of UG 140 or a combination of the two. The drawing does not, I did a little snippet here of what the notes say about pressure, and they leave it up to the customer to do that. And my question is how is overpressure protection being accomplished for this multi-chamber jacketed system?
So, as far as Okay, so they tested at, what, 200 and, was it 248 at whatever? So we're looking at operating at a fraction of that. Now, we have, if you're talking about like pressure relief valves and that sort of thing, or?
Yeah,
We have pressure relief valves.
let me be more specific about this. There are several jackets that are shown in the drawing as being attached to this shell. Okay? And it's unclear as to how they're connected together. And it doesn't say how the pressure safety relief device is connected to that system. Okay. And that's what I would like to know is where is the pressure safety relief device and how is it connected to the jacket? So
In
that-
relationship to the vessel?
Yes, please.
I don't know, but I can find out. Because I don't, I mean,
If you don't know, that's okay. That's,
yeah, I didn't know. See, the last meeting we had, I was asked 3 specific things to return with. And so that's what I did. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars to get this information. So, and that's the 3 things I was asked, and that's what I brought. So if I need more description or more thing, I'll do whatever I have to do.
okay, okay. Of course, so now we're talking about a pressure safe, how is it provided? You know, sometimes it's provided as part of the system pressure, you know, steam or water, or whatever it is, it's part of the piping system. Whatever way, whatever device is used, there's a capacity number that needs to be determined to size and select the safety relief valve itself. So that I'd like to know what that capacity number is based on. And then finally, the overpressure safety valve device, according to the code, needs to be a V-stamped, ASME V-stamped safety relief valve. So I'd like to see maybe a cut sheet of that, you specifying to us what that valve is.
Yeah. Well, I know there's no ASME stamp on anything there.
Well, those are all requirements
Yeah.
of the code.
Right, and so, and that's what I was asking to begin with, was a waiver from the code, which was,
Okay, so to the chair, does the board care to waiver these requirements that would normally be on an ASME pressure vessel?
Not without being reasonably certain that it's not a risk. And I think going through all this is helping us get to that point, right?
Yeah, we're looking for an or equal here, I'm assuming. And right now, the documentation doesn't say
think this is-
anything about it.
Yeah. I think this is really good. I think this is an aspect we didn't look at back in September. So I think it's good to find these answers out.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I know this Mueller group sent this Zach Wilson to do these calcs, and I'd be curious if he'd be willing to stamp drawings and stand behind this also. This is definitely a concern. If we buy off on something like this, it's us in here, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is ASME code is very black and white, and I think it's a big concern here.
If I may, through the chair. The exemption that these kettles would have met if they were in fact built to the ASME code does not specifically state that they need to be equipped with an ASME approved relief valve. It only says that they need to be provided with a relief valve of any type. So that may have some bearing on your decision as to whether or not you will require them to have an ASME relief valve in order to be considered exempt or waived, however you want to put it.
The same would be true of having a professional engineer stamping calculations. That's not an ASME requirement.
Through the chair, correct. It's just some of our exemptions that we have currently existing do require ASME-approved relieving devices in order for that particular vessel to be exempt. The wording of the exemption that they would have fallen under if they were ASME does not include that. I just wanted to make you all aware of that.
Shall I go on to the
Through the
second?
chair,
So, yeah, go ahead, Roger.
so I went through and I watched the video from the meeting in September just to kind of refresh my memory. And in the meeting, Tom, you had stated that if this vessel does become exempt, there would be no further state oversight, is kind of what I gleaned from your statement. And therefore, so the vessels would not be registered, there'd be no state oversight, so there'd be nothing regulating or preventing the Oregon fruit from cranking this thing up to 60, 70, 80 pounds, whatever they think their needs might be. And that's a pretty big concern of mine.
Good point.
Through the chair, I recognize that point and would point out that that is technically true of any piece of equipment that we deem exempt. I don't feel like we have any reason to feel that Oregon fruit products would be misleading or dishonest any more than anyone else would be. The exemption that they would have fallen under has a maximum set pressure of 150 psi. I would recommend that if the board decides to exempt this piece of equipment, as is their right, that they determine a specific maximum pressure that they want this thing to be operated at. Whether that's 150 psi per the original exemption, or if that's a different one, that's your choice, but I would recommend that you make that clear as part of your approval or disapproval of what pressure they can operate at. Also-
So through the chair, you're asking us to make a guess and put our stamp on it. That's what it would amount to.
So through the chair, just to address that, I'm glad you mentioned that because I just wanted to remind everyone what the statutory authority you have says. In Oregon Revised Statute, Chapter 480, Section 5256, it says, notwithstanding any requirement of Oregon Revised Statute 48510 to 48670 or the state building code, so the Department of Consumer Business Services may adopt rules granting partial or complete exemption for a boiler pressure vessel if the board determines that the boiler pressure vessel does not present a danger to public health or safety within this state. So that statute gives you the authority to make any boiler pressure vessel exempt as long as you feel that it does not present a danger to public health or safety. It doesn't require that you establish an engineering equivalency. It just requires that you feel that it's safe. I feel like the board felt at the last meeting that establishing an engineering equivalency was the best way to accomplish that. But in the end, it's still your decision, and you have full authority to do that based on whatever information is provided.
Through the chair, I recall Mr. Haynes at the last meeting stating that there were between 9 and 11 people in proximity of these vessels during operation, and that the controls or the control panel was in close proximity to the vessels. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's now close proximity, if you're saying within 100 feet or so, yes. Within 15 feet, there is one person, which we call the kettle operator. Within 20 feet, there would be 2 more people. And then the rest are more like 75 feet away or more.
like to get into your second question?
Yes, I would. Thank you to the chair. So on the second question, it is, has to do with the loadings to be considered in the design. This is UG 22. A vessel shall include those from, and my focus here of item F is seismic reactions where required. The ASME code in Oregon State Structural Amendments requires seismic calculations for equipment that weighs over 40 pounds. That's specific here to Oregon. Provide calculations that include seismic load calculations to demonstrate the following. And these are more strength requirements, how the vessel leg strength satisfies the ASME code requirements, how the vessel leg to head connection satisfies the ASME code requirements, how the leg to jacket weld connection satisfies the ASME code requirements, and how the leg base plate to floor anchor satisfies the building code requirements. So in other words, in the event, there's a picture here of this, in the event of a seismic reaction, our pressure vessels need to maintain their integrity. And this particular leg, I've seen many tanks of this sort. Generally, there would be a base plate, it'd be anchored down to the floor in some way or cross braced. And this particular one that is shown, you can kind of see the leg goes up and attaches to the vessel. So obviously we don't want the vessel to fall over or slide around. And we don't want to compromise the jacket or the shell so that it leaks. So those type of calculations could be performed. I wouldn't suggest a test to see if they fail, but that would be considered customary for a pressure vessel calculation package to include those sorts of things. So to the chair, I don't know the intricacies of the division. You know, when I personally send in a set of drawings, they go in, and sometimes the structural engineer is involved. Sometimes it has to do with a mechanical permit, particularly seismic sort of matters. But just to the reason that I viewed this as being a legitimate question is it is integral. And since this is not going to go through a mechanical review or a permitting process or a structural review or permitting process, it seemed appropriate for us to address this question.
I don't know what to say.
Through the chair, if I might, I will say that the boiler code specifically requires that all local jurisdictional requirements are met when it comes to securing, mounting a piece of equipment, and providing for seismic considerations. The boiler program has always felt that was outside of our scope. We've never done anything beyond ensuring that a vessel is secured in place. I imagine mechanical permits were pulled when the equipment was originally installed, so they're probably already meeting seismic requirements. Whether or not they're meeting ASME requirements for the leg structural strength, that I don't know. But I think it's something the board should consider, is that typically seismic and mounting considerations are outside the scope of the boiler program. Whether or not that's outside the scope of the boiler board, I can't say.
May I?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. So you are correct in that assumption. We did everything in our facility. We since it was new, it had to be everything had to be anchored to meet seismic specs, and it was inspected. We used Carlson testing to do. It was for our entire facility. Everything in there had to be anchored in a certain way with certain bolts, a certain depth. And so that was done by we hired a company to do it, the same company, I believe it was MPP that we hired to do that. And Carlson Testing was the group that came out and signed off on it. So that's been done, not just for the tanks though, but for all of our equipment.
To the chair?
Yep.
So those you probably don't know any of the details associated with it, but that's probably for the anchorage and the base plate part of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they base it on height and weight, and yeah, basically it's height, weight, and then there's they call it like a center mass or something like that that they go by, that they use. And
Was those calculations prepared by a structural engineer? Professional engineer?
So, Carlson, okay, they were. So I'm trying to think of the company that we used, but it was, I can't think of their name, but I have that information. I'm just, I'm trying to think of who we used for that. If you give me a little bit, maybe I can think of but we did hire I'll think of it. But yes, it was. And if I have to, I can, email you who it was, the company that we used, if I can't think of it before I leave here. Yeah, definitely though. Because at the time, we thought it was kind of silly because it was, it was expensive to hire them to do it. And then I don't know what when we look at it, we're just operations people. And so when we look at it, we're going, well, okay. And so the people come out and put the bolts in, then they come out and be inspected. And then this other company in the background is just, saying okay and signing off on it. So, but I will think of who it is.
Any other questions?
One thing through the chair, so not through seismic terms, but in terms of some kind of failure, it needs to be anchored so that it can't move about. It might be the same as a seismic thing, but a failure would be just as bad. Is it anchored to the wall at all? Near the walls? Besides the legs?
No, but they're very close. They're close to a wall, and there's piping. Of course, there's piping above it that's connected to, because it actually goes to other equipment. So there's.
Can't depend on piping, but I'm thinking in terms of like a home water heater. Maybe it's not law, but they want you to have a strap on it of some kind. So that's what I see here. Just basics, very basics.
Through the chair, just to be clear, this is currently bolted to the floor with seismic mountings per the evaluation you had done when they were initially installed.
Correct. And I do have all the didn't know we were going there today. I apologize that I was not prepared for that, but I have all the information and I can get that if I even make a phone call.
And through the chair, I would just remind the board that the question we're facing right now is whether or not we feel, or you feel, that the vessel is safe enough to the public to allow it to be installed when it doesn't currently have an ASME stamp on it. We're not necessarily looking to add additional requirements beyond the scope of the boiler program. We're just looking to see whether or not, as installed or with changes within the scope of the boiler program, do we feel that it is safe enough to be made exempt from further regulation? That's all we're really trying to address right now.
Through the chair, this is Pat Lamb. I'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
In the Oregon Boiler Code, it says all boilers and pressure vessels to be installed in this state shall be inspected during construction. I'm taking it the inspection is through an inspector, ASME certified, in hopes that they can get a stamp on it. What quality assurance do we have that this thing was inspected? Most likely this came from a state with no boiler code at all, like Texas or some other state. Why would we want to take the risk in allowing this boiler or kettle to be installed in our state? You can go to ASME's webpage and they say simply that it was built in a code shop and not being a stamped vessel isn't the same thing as being an ASME stamped vessel. A lot of these shops do this, and they're selling to us states with no code, and they're getting a big price reduction. I just don't see how we can guarantee that this is a safe vessel, because when they're doing an inspection, boiler inspector, there's stop points during construction. It says, I don't want you to go any further than this so I can inspect before you go any further. I just don't see how you can say that this is a safe vessel. That's all I got.
Any other questions or?
Just one thing through the chair. I feel that we're really trying to help this guy out here, but I don't know if it's the right thing or not. So I'm just one voice there.
I'm with you. I'm nervous. I'm new to this. You know, I want to make sure we make the right decision. I'm really hung up. I like everything you brought back. I'm hung up now on the safety relief concerns, because that's a big deal. Knowing that they are sized properly, that would be a big thing for me. Otherwise, I don't know. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
Through the chair, I don't see anything on here about the safety relief. Does it relief to the atmosphere, or does it relief to a catch tank for the product, or what? I don't know.
There's a pressure relief valve on the lines, so there's pressure relief for the tank, there's pressure relief for the lines. But to answer Eric's question, I don't know exactly how it correlates between the jackets. I don't know. I just furthest thing from my mind as far as that I did it, you know. And when I had these things, after, like I said, after our last meeting, I went away with everything. I wrote it down, and so when I called the company to try to get somebody to fly out here, that's what I asked them, and I didn't. So I didn't ask them maybe everything that I should have. But I asked them what I thought I needed.
Through the chair, with this Mueller group, is there any documentation with stop points, hold points, certified welders, MTRs on the material? Do they have any documentation on that when these tanks were built?
I probably can get that. I'm sure you're aware that Paul Mueller is one of the largest manufacturers of these pressure vessels. But I'm sure I could probably get, if you need to know the people that actually built the tank, I probably could get that information for you. At this point, I've dealt with these people a lot now for the last few months, so, and they're willing to help any way they can.
Through the chair, what part of my business involves developing packages like this and helping people. Most of it comes from Europe, China, or Japan. They have their own standards, and they want to bring equipment here into the United States, Oregon. And many different jurisdictions look at these vessels, and they have to go through an exemption process, just as we're going through it. And all I can say is that in every case, when a customer comes to me, I say, look, you're going to be asked, what sort of quality control program do you have as a manufacturer of this? Oh, they're going to want to see the MTRs, to see that the materials are equivalent in some sort. They always ask for the ASME code calculations to go along with it, and that the welders are certified welders. And so they furnish a package of documentation that is very similar to what an ASME code shop would provide as being part of it. If a customer approaches me or a manufacturer approaches me without that documentation, I just tell them, well, you're in for some inspections, maybe some radiography and other things, but you know, the jurisdictions are looking for equivalency, something that is safe. And I've reviewed the calculations. I understand them. They're just fine. What I'm seeing here, this is the sort of thing that you would normally get for a jacket. There's not much said about the vessel, nothing said about the pressure safety devices, nothing said about seismic calculations. So I feel comfortable, me personally, with what we've been furnished. Hydro testing and such is fine. What I don't know is what you gentlemen are concerned about is qualified welders, MTRs, things that we'll never know because we don't have the pedigree papers to go along with it. But the testing, generally speaking, the testing is kind of the proof of the pudding, or as weld strength goes. The weld symbols that are on here, it's a little on the light side, how the jacket is attached. But if it holds up to pressure, you've got test results for jackets of similar types that demonstrate that it'll hold up at pressure and it'll do what it's being asked to do. So I feel comfortable with that. But there are just some other pieces of the puzzle here that need to be considered by the board. Steam will kill, and so if a failure, that's the whole reason why we're here, is to prevent things like that from happening. Stuff happens during a seismic event, aside from the chaos of everything going on. That's the more likely scenario of something failing is during a seismic event, unknown. So, there's reason here in this area, it's a high seismic zone, and we'll see what happens when we have one. How it'll affect the state. I think me personally, just lacking a few pieces to the puzzle is all we really need to flush out here.
Through the chair, one more time. So we don't know the date of manufacture, original manufacturer?
Yeah, it's Paul Mueller manufactured it. And there's a date there somewhere, I believe.
Okay. We don't know. The other unknown is we don't know how hard they've been run before they were bought out. It could be, I don't know, could be maybe some fatigue in there. Stainless steel isn't impervious. I want to throw that out there.
Through the chair, I don't see a manufacture date, but I do see a design date on the paperwork. You got a date of 7/18/01, then you've got another date of 7/25/01. Just a design by, reviewed by, but not a manufacturer date.
2001?
Yes.
Chair?
Yeah.
McKinsey Engineering,
Did seismic stuff?
yes. Yes. Somebody want to think of
Sorry,
the
my
name.
headset just went dead. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Any more questions or comments or?
If I may, Chair. So again, we're not looking, we don't have to, I know that these were rated at 90 PSI. We don't have to operate them at 90 PSI. We could operate them at, 50 or 60 PSI. We just can't operate them at 15. And so that's what I'm asking for and trying to do whatever it takes.
To the chair. So when we approve, if we approve or when we approve this, will these vessels be registered with the state as a part of the database and categorized as an exemption? Will a nameplate be added onto it to reflect?
Through the chair, no. Any vessel that's not exempt does not end up in our database. There are some vessels that are exempt that require an installation inspection. So there may be a installation permit recorded that we could track that way, but most vessels that are exempt, and that means they don't end up in our system in any way. I think in this case, if the board made any contingencies or requirements for approval, that the division would be able to support ensuring those requirements via an inspection, but we would not register the vessel and not put it in our database.
To the chair, so we could mandate, for example, that it would follow the same inspection requirements that the code, that our current pressure vessels are following, or anything different. We could put it on a schedule.
Through the chair, I don't believe you can put it on the schedule. The wording of that statute, which I can pull back up again if you need me to, specifically says that you're exempting the piece of equipment, which means that it would not fall under any form of inspection schedule. We can do some digging and see if there's a way that you can approve it and put it under a schedule, but as far as I'm aware, the only real path we have right now is to make it exempt.
May I? I would have absolutely no problem with that if, any inspection, at any given time, Oregon Fruit would be fine with that.
So through the chair, I would say that if that's a direction that the board wants to consider, that I would request that you give Tyler and myself time to find the correct path to do that. There may be wording there to do that, there may not be. We'll have to look and see. The one that Oregon Fruit Products specifically has requested is this one that would exempt them entirely. So, through the chair, if I may, just a summary of the concerns that I've heard mentioned today. The board appears to be concerned about the pressure relieving devices, whether or not they will be built to the ASME standard and what their set point and capacity will be. All information that can be verified through inspection. I heard concerns about support structures and whether they're built to ASME code and whether or not they satisfy local building code requirements. I believe that second question has been addressed. And then the only other real concern I have heard is whether or not the vessel is built by qualified welders with code approved materials. I think there's a chance that information may not be attainable. Part of why they build vessels not to the code is so they don't have to maintain that QC information. So that information may not be available. Those are the major concerns I've heard. I don't know if the board would like to discuss those or move on to making a decision, but that's the summary of where we are at this point.
Is there any more discussion?
Through the chair, just, I guess, one comment. I'm sitting, looking at the design, wondering what would be the failure mode of this vessel? To me, it looks like it would be an internal failure as opposed to external. I don't know that. That's just my gut feeling. The inner jacket failed. It's going to be contained, right?
That would be my assumption. Is that,
As opposed to an
you
outer
agree with
jacket
that?
failure.
Yeah, this is gonna fail, the jacket's gonna fail on the outside of the vessel.
It'll be an outside
That's where the
failure.
jacket is, it's on the outside of the vessel. All the welds are on the outside of the vessel, so any kind of, it's gonna go out.
So the outer,
It's an exterior jacket.
so it is an exterior jacket. It's not the way I was seeing this drawing, but
so unless anybody has anything further to say, I'd entertain either a motion to table or a motion to vote, a motion for Mr. Hayes to get us more information. What do you guys want to see collectively? Do you have enough information to make a decision?
Mr. Chair, I do not have enough
Okay.
information to make a decision at this time.
Please identify yourselves when you speak.
Sorry, Debbie, it's Roger Hendricks.
Thanks, Roger. Okay.
This is Pat Lamb through the chair. I feel that I have enough information and I'd be willing to vote.
Through the chair, it seems to me that the available options are to either vote yay or nay on whether to exempt the vessel, or you could always table to the next meeting, which would be in March. You could also request that he obtain more information, and also table until March.
Through the chair,
There would need to be a motion to do that.
Yes.
I don't think more information is going to help us at this point. I think, if we had stamp, we wouldn't be here, so that's all I got.
I'm tending to agree. I don't want to drag poor Mr. Hayes out. I think at this point, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to vote, unless anybody has any further comments or questions for anybody.
I'm putting you on the spot, but
I may? All right. I make a motion, how do I say it, to vote whether or not to give the exemption to this vessel. Appropriate?
Perhaps it might be best to move whether to exempt it or not. So move to exempt the vessel, and then if no one votes, then you could say to not exempt the vessel. And vote again. So just, you can just.
Oh. So I make a motion to approve the request to waive certain pressure vessel exemption requirements based on the additional information received. Up there.
I'd like to take a roll call vote. I'll take a roll call vote if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
One question through the chair. If we vote to exempt, we have to put a pressure amount on this thing. I don't want it to be 90.
How do we put that in?
Do pressure limit.
If the board would vote. to
If it's
exempt,
approved, if
then-
it's approved.
Then you would,
Okay.
you could move to set a limit on the pressure.
As a secondary motion? Okay. Okay.
Go forward with a roll call vote. Pat Lamb,
I vote no to exempt, no exemptions.
Kenneth Hill,
No.
Roger Hendricks,
No.
Thomas Ingstrom,
No.
Eric Anderson,
No.
Blake Alexander,
No.
Chair Byer.
No. Motion failed. Do I need now? Right. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 10:28 a.m.